what you say.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more.
Hi, I'm Rick Aaliyah, and these are two of my rescue dogs, Millie and Princess. Welcome to our video series, Mike Kelly Must Go, where we lay out the case that Mike Kelly, U.S. Congressman from Pennsylvania's 16th District, should be voted out of office in November. You know, sometime when Millie's restless and can't sleep, I read her a bedtime story. Princess is deaf, so she just likes to hang with me whether I'm reading or not. And one of Millie's favorites is Mike Kelly's economic fairy tale. And we'd like to share it with you. Ready? Ready? Once upon a time, in a place called Pennsylvania's 16th District, the people elected a man named Mike Kelly to represent them in the United States House of Representatives. Kelly told the people he'd always do right by them, but then he headed off to Washington, where he started doing things to help rich people and big corporations, but not so much for the average folks back home. Then one day, a man named Donald Trump decided to run for president, and he won. And Kelly fell in love with him. To him, President Trump could do no wrong. He was just the greatest president ever. Kelly loved the president so much that even when he did things like lock immigrant kids in cages, or say mean and racist things, or even ignore a deadly virus and allow it to spread around the country, killing people, he never stopped loving and supporting him. The problem was, President Trump really wasn't a very good president. He was really an awful president. So Kelly had to lie a lot to make the president look good. And he wanted to make himself look good too. One night, after a long day of calling corporations and rich people and asking them to give him money, Kelly was fast asleep when he heard a knock at his door. He went downstairs, and when he opened the door, he saw a leprechaun standing there. "Hello, Mr. Kelly," the leprechaun said. "I've come to tell you some important things. May I come in?" "Well, of course, come in," Kelly said, and he and the leprechaun went into the living room where they sat down to talk. The leprechaun had a very serious look on his face when he said, "I've come to talk to you about your lying. It has to stop. You keep telling people things that aren't true." "What do you mean?" Kelly asked. You could tell he wasn't very happy. "For one thing, the economy. You keep telling people how the president has built..." Let me see if I have this right. The leprechaun pulled a notebook out of his pocket and flipped through several pages until he found what he was looking for. "You said we are experiencing the best economy in half a century." "We are," Kelly says. "It's all thanks to President Trump. I know this virus has slowed things down, but before that we were going gangbusters." The leprechaun shook his head and leaned back in his chair, like someone who knew he had a tough job ahead of him. "The truth is," the leprechaun said, "our economic growth began under President Obama, who led us out of the Great Recession that he inherited from a Republican president. What happened after President Trump was elected was just an extension of the Obama recovery." "What?" Kelly exclaimed. "That's balderdash." The leprechaun continued. "Actually, the Trump economy has underperformed the Obama economy in several places. It was all in a story in the New York Times in February entitled, 'The Economy is Not as Good as It Looks.'" "Fake news," Kelly bellowed. "No," the leprechaun said calmly. "It's all based on facts and statistics." "That can't be true," Kelly said. "What about all those jobs President Trump has created?" "Don't you know that President Obama has created more jobs over the same period of time as President Trump?" the leprechaun asked. "In President Trump's first 35 months as president, the country added an average of 191,000 jobs per month, and the unemployment rate fell by 1.2%. During the last 35 months of President Obama's presidency, the average was 227,000 jobs per month, and the unemployment rate dropped by 2%. Overall, economic growth was essentially the same under President Trump and President Obama. Last year was the slowest expansion during the Trump presidency. The leprechaun waited for Kelly to answer, and after a few seconds, he said, "Well, that may be, but the American worker is still doing better under President Trump." The leprechaun smiled and shook his head before continuing. While there has been roughly a 3% annual growth rate under President Trump, when you add in the effect of inflation, you see that, on average, real wages have risen just 0.8% annually under him. This compared to 1.3% over a similar period under President Obama. "Now you just hold it right there," Kelly said angrily. "We're making America great again." "I'm not done," the leprechaun replied. "The fact is, income inequality remains at historic levels. Corporate profits have risen sharply, thanks in large part to the Trump-Kelly tax cut, and a soaring stock market has benefited the wealthy disproportionately. President Trump's tax cuts for individual Americans were regressive, helping the rich more than the middle-class Americans. While earnings for those at the very bottom have increased, that's at least partly due to states increasing their minimum wages. But the gap between those at the top and those in the middle continued to widen. President Trump promised his tax cut would add $4,000 a year to the average American paychecks, but it turned out to be $930, and real wages have barely budged. His promised investment boom fizzled quickly, and capital expenditures by businesses have been declining in recent terms. Is that really making America great again? Or is it making America greater for the rich? The leprechaun asked. Kelly's face was going redder and redder. He looked like he was about to blow his top. "All right, what about the GDP?" he said. "That's it, GDP, a little thing we like to call gross domestic product. That will show you." "Yes, it does show something," the leprechaun said. "Let's look." President Trump's best year of real GDP growth, with accounts for inflation, was 2.9% in 2018, according to The Balance, a financial website using figures from the U.S. Department of Commerce's Bureau of Economic Analysis. In the 91 years from 1929 to 2019, 47 years had better GDP growth, including 17 that more than doubled President Trump's best year. Kelly looked downcast. "Well, numbers don't tell you everything," he said. "Sometimes you just have to ignore the facts if you're going to get any place." Did you know that Axios reported that economic growth under President Trump hasn't matched that of some of his recent predecessors? The leprechaun asked. "No, please stop," Kelly pleaded. But the leprechaun continued. Average annualized GDP growth has been 2.5% during President Trump's first term. By comparison, Ronald Reagan had 3.1% growth during his first term and 3.9% his second. Bill Clinton had 3.5% during his first term and 4.0% in his second. Also, some aspects of President Trump's economy, like wage growth and business investment, pale in comparison to other periods. GDP growth has failed to hit Trump's oft-promised 3% mark annually. Okay, I get your point," Kelly testified. "But what about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? That should count for something." "You mean the Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts that resulted in billionaires paying a smaller portion of their income in federal, state, and local taxes than average Americans for the first time in history? Gave corporations a big tax cut that they used to set records in stock buybacks and corporate dividends? Allowed 91 corporations in the Fortune 500 to pay no federal taxes in 2018, despite earnings of about $101 billion, and 400 of America's largest corporations to pay an average federal tax rate of about 11%? You mean that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act?" Kelly looked down at his feet. "Yeah, that's the one," he said. "I'd love to talk to you about that, but I have to run. I have a lot of Republicans to visit. You guys sure do have a problem with telling the truth." The leprechaun stood up. "Don't get up, I'll let myself out. Good night, Mr. Kelly. Maybe we'll talk again sometime." When Kelly looked up, the leprechaun was gone. He took a Made America Great Again hat from an end table and put it on. After a few seconds of thought, he said, "There must be some way we can spin this. I'll think of something." From then on, the people of Pennsylvania's 16th District waited patiently for November 3rd, where they could elect someone to replace Kelly. They knew that would be their only chance to live happily ever after. The end. Please go to our website, www.mikekellymustdo.com, to see more videos and more detailed information about why Mike Kelly should not be reelected in November. And remember, if you're going to get a dog, please adopt, don't shop. Thanks for watching.